We can get started. We'll have a couple more trickling in that are coming straight from another meeting. But in the meantime, first up, we have approval of our agenda for the day. Do that by consensus. Is there anything we need to modify about our agenda? Right, hearing none, we can consider that approved unanimously. Next up will be approval of our June 6th meeting minutes. Take a motion second from people who were present at that meeting.
A second.
I heard a second without a motion.
Oh, I thought you motioned, sorry.
No. Do you want to move it then?
I'll move it.
We have a motion from Chris
I'll second.
and then a second from David. Thank you. Are there any corrections to those minutes? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes as presented, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. Thank you. That brings us to the public invitation portion of our meeting for people to address the commission for any items on our agenda from the public. Do we have anyone signed up? This one?
No, we don't.
Okay. As a reminder for anyone watching, if you want to speak to us in the future, there is an email address on our agendas posted and you can contact them for info. That then brings us on to our business item for the day, which is the Meesville Ravine Park Reserve Long Range Plan for Dakota County. We have Tracy presenting. Go ahead.
Chair Commissioners, Council Member. Hi, my name is Tracy Kinney. I'm a planning analyst in community development. And today before you is Dakota County's Meesville Ravine Park Reserve Long Range Plan. Dakota County's Meesville Ravine Park Reserve is located in the southeast corner of both the regional park system and Dakota County. The park reserve is located just east of Lake Billsby Regional Park and adjacent to the wild and scenic Cannon River. The focus of this plan is to update the long-range vision for the park reserve, guide improvements for the next 10 or more years, and adjust the park's boundary. The updated plan is very similar to the 2005 plan, with a focus on natural resource restoration, limited trail expansion, 2 new rustic trailheads, and safer Cannon River access. The maps before you are figures 1 through 3 of your business item. Dakota County conducted an equity analysis as part of the long-range plan. The project team found that people of color, people with disabilities, seniors, and those with lower household income comprise a smaller share of park visitors than would be predicted by their population, the proportion of the general resident population. Current reasons for underrepresentation in park visitation include distance from home, lack of awareness, time and transportation options, in addition, safety concerns, language barriers, weather, cultural and religious insensitivity and discrimination, and lack of desired recreation facilities. Dakota County hosted a range of engagements for prioritized communities, including Latino visitors, youth, and people living with disabilities. Dakota County also contracted with specific Dakota American Indian Tribal Historic Preservation Officers to conduct a traditional cultural places survey. The advice heard shaped the plan. This includes preserving and protecting natural resources, increasing access to the Cannon River, providing access to more of the park with low-impact natural surface trails, improving accessibility, and cultural landscape preservation and interpretation. Dakota County involved the public throughout the development of the plan. The project team engaged the public through online interactive planning and questionnaires, pop-up tabling, open houses, and meetings. Key themes emerged, including increasing natural resource management, trout brook restoration, and improved access to more of the park, expand wildlife viewing and river recreation, expand trail-based recreation, balance recreational development with natural system protection, improved boat launch access, and better wayfinding. Partner agencies include the Douglas Township, the Minnesota DNR, Cannon River Trail, Dakota County Soil and Water Conservation District, North Cannon River Watershed Management Organization, and Tribal Historic Preservation Officers for Dakota County tribes located within Minnesota. All partner agency comments shape the plan and are supportive of it. On to boundary adjustments and acquisitions. This plan recommends removing one 22 parcel inholding from the existing boundary and adding 2 parcels that total 77 acres, which were identified as stewardship inholdings in the 2005 plan. The 22 acres to be removed is an inholding located in Goodhue County. This parcel is separated from most of the park by Orlando Trail and has minimal recreational value. The property is shown in the map located on the eastern border, labeled number 6 on the map. And it's in the far right side. Oh, got this thing. Nope, I just turned it off. Sorry. Oh, it's back. There you go. Thank you so much for pointing that out. Excellent. So just a tiny little parcel over there. The 2 added parcels on the east side of the park boundary, shown in on the west side of the park boundary, shown in red on the map, are currently owned and operated by Dakota County. With these boundary changes, the total acreage of the park is 1,850 acres, including the 1,519 acres of Dakota County owned land and 309 acres of private inholdings. Lastly, acquisition costs. The plan identifies 17 inholdings, including the one proposed for removal as part of this update, so there's 16 inholding parcels. The total estimated market value of all the 309 acre inholding parcels is $5.1 million. This cost includes the total estimated value of the parcel and buildings, even when the recommendation would be to acquire only a portion of it. So this cost will likely go down. So this is image is figure 3 of your business item. On to the development concept. This plan includes both a 10-year and a long-term development concept. The long-term development concept creates a vision for improvements. The 10-year development concept captures the improvements that can be reasonably expected to be accomplished over this time period based on historic funding levels. These images are figures 4 and 5 in your business item. So let's start with the 10-year plan since it's most feasible. The 10-year plan on the left focuses on expanding upon what exists today, improving accessibility, clarifying circulation, adding complementary amenities, and improving the visitor's experience. The addition of one trailhead named North Trout Brook Trailhead with 2 existing trailheads establishes access to the northern part of the park. Enhancements made to the park reserve along the Cannon River, including an accessible fishing pier, will create an inviting and inclusive recreational experience for guests, while an expanded trail network will enable visitors to explore a greater diversity of the park reserve's habitats. Now on to the long-term vision plan. The long-term plan includes improved circulation, accessibility, trailheads, and comfort amenities. It focuses on carefully expanding the trail system to better accommodate visitors with a range of abilities, providing access to more of the park reserve's vast landscape and establishing a direct connection to the Cannon Valley Trail that will make the Meesville Ravine Park Reserve an easy-to-reach destination for visitors exploring the Cannon River Valley. Overall, there is planned to be 4 trailheads and 10.7 miles of trail within the park reserve, with the majority of them being unpaved trails, as well as 1 mile of accessible trail. 1 new trailhead is planned to be added to the 3 established trailheads, with new amenities planned for all the trailheads, offering convenient starting points to explore different areas of the park reserve. Each will offer parking, wayfinding, and screened portable restrooms. Lastly, as a regional park reserve, no more than 20% of the Meesville Ravines area is allowed to be developed for active recreation. And 80% of the land must be devoted to preservation and restoration of the natural environment. The long-term plan increases developed land from 2.1 to 3.4% of the park reserve's total 1,850 acres, and the plan seeks to site new development in ways that minimizes impact to sensitive areas. So the costs of the projects include, for development and natural resource improvements, these are approximately $15.1 million, which includes $3.7 million for the first 10 years of implementation. Acquisition costs. Acquisition costs are $5.1 million, as we talked about before, and operations and maintenance of the 10-year plan is approximately $500,000 annually. So the rationale for the proposed action is that the Park Reserve Plan is consistent with the requirements of the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, particularly Chapter 5, Planning Strategy 1, and other council policies, which is Thrive 2040. So the proposed action before you is that the Metropolitan Council approve the Meesville Ravine Park Reserve Long Range Plan. And then 2, to approve the boundary adjustment, removing 22 acres of private inholdings and adding 77 acres of Dakota County owned parkland within the Meesville Ravine Park Reserve boundary. And 3, to advise the county to consider implementing the recommendations for solar resources and the Minnesota DNR in the advisory comments section of this business item. And I should note that Lil Leatham and Nikki Geisler is here from Dakota County, and I can help with any questions that you have.
All right, thank you. Questions, commissioners? David?
Yeah, this seems well thought out and a good opportunity. You know, that beginning part on equity, and forgive me if I missed this, but you know, mention of Latino and Dakota communities and youth, disabilities. Has there been actual discussion with these groups, or there has? Okay.
Chair, Commissioner, Council members, the types of engagements are listed on the slide, and so I think they have a variety of different types of one-on-one meetings, but we can ask Dakota County for more information if you'd like.
Yeah, I guess I was just wondering, like, it seemed like that was that helped inform your plan and how I just was wondering. So if you had to actually say where the meat of some of those improvements are, you know, preserving, protecting natural resources. So is there, I'm assuming there's some like designating some site areas that are of significance that are not to be developed, or if they are, they're in some particular way, like any other additional information. I was just curious.
You do have some county staff here to speak to some of that.
Hi, I'm Lil Latham, Principal Planner with Dakota County. And as far as the preserving and protecting both the natural and cultural resources, we at the very beginning of the process, we contracted with the Upper Sioux, and they conducted a traditional cultural places survey for the park. Before the survey, all we knew was there was a high likelihood of sacred and important sites because of its location on the Cannon River, but we didn't have any on-the-ground knowledge, or there were no known sites. And they identified a great deal of the park as sensitive, and the whole, there's over 700 acres on an upper terrace. And so they made a map for us that showed the areas that we should be light on development And then we worked, in the long range plan, there are some trails through one of those areas and we worked with them on the conceptual alignment. So we don't have a lot of information, they didn't want to share with us a lot of information about what those sites are, but there are likely burials among the sites and exactly where they are. This park has an advantage at this time that it's lightly developed, so it does give us the opportunity to protect those sites in the future as we work in partnership.
So you've got a master map somewhere of like do not touch areas or something like that?
Yeah, of consultation, I would describe them more as consultation areas that, well, probably the whole park is a consultation area, but higher sensitivity consultation areas.
Okay. It related to that, I saw the 80% statistic, 80% is preservation, 20% to be amended in some way. That seems like the right balance for really any park that's kind of in this kind of zone of just outside the metro area. Is that fair to say, or is that not, do you not have like a percentage that you attach? Is it just every park area is unique to its own?
That one actually comes from us.
So that does.
The designation of park reserve as the unit type, it dictates that at least 80% is left natural in our policy.
It does.
So
Okay.
the implementing agencies can tell us in our system plan negotiation kind of stuff, which ones might be good candidates for that designation versus a regular regional park one. It also deals with their overall size, but that's something that we identify when we're updating the system plan portion.
Okay. And then last question, I promise. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Just so I understand the financial part of this, thank you for that answer. So 15.1 million, 3.7 million of that is for implementation over the first 10 years. Another 5.1 million is the acquisition cost, so that's 8.8 million if my math is right. And then what's the remaining 7 million?
Well, I don't think so let me try to repeat back. So 15 million for the long-range plan, so that's if the whole long-range plan graphic was implemented. And then additional 5 for land acquisition. And I believe that's.
Oh, I'm sorry, so the acquisition is outside of the.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm seeing some nods. Good, okay.
Yeah, so the land acquisition is outside of the development cost.
Okay.
Sue?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to note that the tribal consultation goes on both with parks and trails, but also with environmental services and any other development, transit, whatever we do, it's required. And the various divisions here from that council have folks who work really hard on that tribal consultation, so that's a real important part. And 2 more things I want to note. Number one, the most important one is that Dakota County, kind of stepping on Amanda's toes here, she can do this bragging, but Dakota County is phenomenal in its commitment to parks and trails. They have just, I can't say enough good about it, and I didn't know anything about the Dakota County park system until I became a member of the Friends of the Mississippi River. We had some sort of an event out at the Spring Lake Park Preserve overlooking the Mississippi River, and I have had a number of opportunities since then to go back there. It is one of the most gorgeous spots along the Mississippi. It's just stunning, especially in the fall. The last thing I want to note, and this isn't just directed at Dakota County, but I'd like to suggest that we really engage in some conversations about emergency preparedness within our parks and trail systems. I'm a member of the state age-friendly Minnesota Council. I represent the Met Council on that council. We're using the word council here, but we had a working session yesterday morning with various fire chiefs from around the state regarding emergency calls that they get for senior citizens who have fallen. And they were talking about the time and energy it takes for their fire departments to deal with all those calls. And it's really triggered my thinking as it relates to parks and trails, and not just the elderly and not just people with disabilities. It could happen to anybody when you're out on a park and trail. So I'm wondering if we as MPOSC, the members of MPOSC, the commissioners and the staff and the park agencies can make a commitment to be thinking about efforts that can be made to deal with the potential for those kinds of emergencies. Are there phones available? You know, occasionally you're gonna have somebody out on a trail who forgot their phone, or they can't get a signal, any kind of thing. Do we have near the parking lot, a phone that can be used in the event of emergency, whatever the case may be? But I kind of think that's important. I also think that we should be thinking about weather-related emergencies. If I'm out on a trail and there's a tornado warning, how am I gonna know that if I can't hear the whistles that go off in various communities? So just some things to think about that are a little mundane, but when you get to be 70, you get to worry about these things, so.
Sure. Okay, Anthony.
Especially with this plan, the equity identification around all abilities, and so I'm wondering in the implementation plan, is there any, is there something that specifically addresses that? And I asked, because one of the things I will say, I'm also hearing rave reviews from the DNR's use of all-terrain wheelchairs. Just like amazing time, person after person after person, and I've been kind of driving people to experience it. And so at $15,000 a share, I think is the number. I don't remember exactly. I mean, you might even know. You don't know any DNR friends? You guys don't sit around and talk about.
We talked about it, but I can't remember.
I'm just kidding.
Yes.
But you know what I mean? At that kind of number, even within a $3.7 million implementation level, 4 or 5 of those winds up being $100,000. So I just think that it was something you identified early in the equity analysis, and I think it would be, especially for parks that are relatively, the goal is that pristine, experience. It'd be something for us to think about. So that's the question: is in that, in that 10 years, is there something thrown in there that actually addresses that specifically with an overinvestment to achieve those, different outcomes?
So I'll start and then Nikki. So as far as facilities, yes, there are a number of things. One is the boat launch today is extremely rustic. Like you carry your boat in and there's a steep hill that has no anything really. And so making a boat launch that's more accessible and closer to the water is a key investment. There are no accessible trails today. So adding, I believe it's in the 5-year 1/2 mile and in the 10-year 1 mile trail loop along the river that would be accessible. An accessible fishing platform, and then we also spoke with an organization called Project Healing Waters about what they would need to run a program at the park, and really they suggested that if they have volunteers who are part of those programs that help the participants, so we just needed some spaces that were clear at the river's edge of vegetation. And then our bathrooms are not accessible currently, so they're composting toilets, so improving that, as well as, I think our picnic shelters are not currently accessible, so adding that, and then some parking, accessible parking that you could get to the boat launch and the picnic shelters. So really focusing on the Cannon River area for the ADA access facilities. And then let Nikki talk a little bit about the all-terrain.
The equipment?
Yeah, equipment.
Chair, Commissioners, Nikki Geisler, Parks Director for Dakota County. Great question. And I am happy to share that actually Dakota County has worked very closely with the DNR. I went out to Tahoe not too long ago for a conference with Jamie McBride, who was really responsible for bringing those chairs to the DNR and he now has lots of budget to bring more accessible equipment, which is phenomenal. I'll be paying close attention. But I had a chance to work with track chairs, and we just bought 2 for Dakota County Parks. So they're sitting in our fleet shop right now. They will be deployed to Lebanon Hills Regional Park to start. That is a park where we have staff available in a visitor center where we do not have that at our other park locations at the moment. But I fully anticipate that we will be looking at how to roll those things out at other locations after we have a successful launch at Lebanon, and we figure out how to even the DNR is only taking reservations by phone right now. There isn't a way to book them online yet, and we'll have to ease into that process as well. But we're very excited and you were right, 15,000, I think it was 34,000 for the 2.
Yeah. Great question. And if I could follow up on that, will that be on the webpage or something denoted somehow that those are available?
Yes, Chair, Commissioner, once we are ready to have them out and the public to see them, we anticipate having not as much media as the DNR probably got. They got national attention, which was fantastic. But we do expect to do a press release, get it on the website, and we'll be letting folks know that they're available.
Yeah, I can just tell you that from the little nature center that I live by, we got one of those chairs, and the people that are so thankful for that opportunity to be able to go out on the trails in those devices, it's just amazing.
It is, and it's not just, we created a space, of course, for people arriving with a mobility device so that we can store it safely while they use the chair, but it's also for folks that I think about my mom at 75, I can't get her out on the trails to walk with me, and this will give us an opportunity to do that together. It's really special, yeah.
One thing that came up at one of our previous meetings for these kinds of things is if you do end up moving them around between park units, we'll have to come up with a good way of telling people exactly where it is today. Because that's something that we saw like with the DNR ones, like, yeah, they're trying on a few places, then if they go somewhere else, how do you know? Bob, I saw you next.
Yes, I'd just like to follow up on Sue's comments about safety with 2 pieces, defibrillators and Narcan. I'm just assuming that is a relatively cost-efficient way of bringing some additional safety to your facilities. And it does a great deal of good.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
And there may even be resources available through the Department of Health or some other entity to help provide that, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I'll just comment on that. We've run into some challenges in getting some of that equipment in Dakota County Parks, and our city park partners have some great AEDs at their sites where they don't staff, that you call a phone number and get the code and you can open it up and use it. So we're trying to get those within our parks. We have AEDs in our buildings again where there are staff. Narcan, however, our county attorney's office right now has a stance that it really is only emergency professionals. And so we're working, I'm very passionate about getting at least our park rangers to carry Narcan. I came from a nonprofit at the Y, and we had 18-year-olds have it out on the trail with kids because we felt like it was critical. So we know it's something that we can do, it's just taking a little while to get to that point. But I appreciate the emphasis, and I'll share that with our county attorney's office.
Thank you. Other commissioner question, Amanda?
Yeah, well, I'll just use the opportunity to commend Dakota County Parks both for the great facilities, but also just you had the question about communicating the wheelchairs. Just you guys do a really, really good job of keeping the website updated, like whenever there's trail closures or anything like that, which with the flooding by where I live, it happens frequently, and so it's always really well updated, so kudos there. And yeah, you do a very good job. And my husband actually had an experience at Lebanon Hills where there was a elderly gentleman with dementia who was lost in the park, and had as he was coming out had staff ask if they had seen anybody. So I would say it is an issue, and he was very impressed with the response at that time. So whenever we're ready, I'll happily make the motion to support this.
All right. Other commissioner questions? I had some. I was wondering, with the tribal consultation stuff, you mentioned them not wanting to give you a lot of information. So I know, like, in some of our previous conversations about how we do better about working with tribes and things is getting some, like, interpretive things, talking about the land and what is there and how it's important to them. But it sounds like in this case, they may not want a lot of public information about what this means to them.
Well, I think we've heard through this project and other projects that less sites, when the sites are sensitive, that they're worried about disturbance. Just more general information about how the area is important or cultural ways or life ways. Those are things that are fine, but not, we can't say, you know, there's a burial mound here, that kind of.
Right. So more like, you know, maybe things are at trailheads or certain other points, but not necessarily, you're looking right in front of you at something.
Yeah, though we have other places in our system where we, like right in front of you, this view or this tree type or this species and the importance of that to the community, that, I mean, those things we can do with sites, more site specific.
Sure, okay. And I was also wondering then, if we have that kind of sensitive spaces besides your development things, do we have to worry about, like, if they don't wanna say where they are, maybe don't mark it off as, you don't want people walking in there. Even if you're not having a trail, people go off trail sometimes. Do we need to do anything with that to protect those sites, or is it just sort of a, if we don't mention it, maybe that does it well?
So the plan itself has a couple pages of cultural landscape recommendations, and among those are to develop management plans for the cultural sites, so specific management plans, so forthcoming, more to learn, more to collaborate on,
Got it.
more to do.
There's a fill-in of to do.
Yes, there's quite a lot, there's a lot to do in that area.
And then with the things coming up, I see in our summary of public engagement, there's a note of concern for county accountability in following up on the Indigenous involvement and engagement. Was there a particular aspect of that concern that this is talking about?
Well, that came from the online survey, so we don't know exactly who, where that came from and who it was from. But I think there's always concern about accountability, just based on history, for working in spaces that are important to Indigenous.
Okay, so there was a comment and we wanted to make sure to call that out, but it's not necessarily a theme of a bunch of comments for a particular reason in this case.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'll comment a bit on that too. So since the plan has been developed, we have, through Parks and Trails Legacy Funds, we've hired our first ever Indigenous liaison with Dakota County Parks. And he has done just a tremendous job in a short time with us so far of really digging into the tribal community's relationships that have been started to figure out how we strengthen, where have there been mistakes along the way, how can we better partner and potentially co-manage in the future some of these sites that have been identified as highly sensitive and very important to tribal communities. So the comments like that, again, like Will said, I think in general, there have been concerns about government entities partnering, trying to partner with Indigenous communities, and what does tribal consultation really mean?
Yes.
Are we listening? Are we doing? Are we, those kinds of things. And by bringing a Dakota individual onto our team to help navigate some of that has been great learning for staff, and I think will be very fruitful in the long run with the partnerships we're creating.
Cool. Shifting gears entirely then to some of the boundary questions. I was wondering, with this one in-holding that's being proposed to be removed, does anyone remember why it was added in the first place and what we're losing by taking it out?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I can speak to that. So that piece, so in our last plan, we added quite a lot of natural, we would like to have as much of the water, I mean, we can't have the whole watershed, it's a huge watershed for a trout brook, but as much as possible to protect the water resources. And since the 05 plan was developed, we now have brand new land conservation plan that identifies conservation focus areas where we can work with landowners on easements or natural resource protection that achieve the same thing without bringing that piece into the park boundary. So we never wanted it as part of the boundary for recreation, and now we're thinking about the boundary in these more rural areas where there's the people who live around the park are less enthusiastic about the park, who live in the in-holdings aren't super enthusiastic about other tools we can use to protect those lands. And in the plan, in the boundary section, there's a graphic of the conservation focus area, which goes well beyond the park boundary. So we can work with, through our land conservation program, we can work with willing landowners on easements and.
Got it, so it's like there's water flowing through that into the park, like.
Yeah, I don't know if there's water, I mean, there is a road, so exactly, I think it made in, there's,
Maybe roughly.
anyway, I'm not exactly sure
But
why
it,
that.
point being, it's not like connecting off to something that's just off screen here that we can't see or anything like that.
Yeah.
Okay. And then just logistically, how does this part work, where there's a couple of other things that are staying in the boundary in Goodhue County? Are those parcels owned by Dakota County despite being in Goodhue? And are they like in this same plan, or is that sort of a partnership deal? How does that work?
So the land that, the in-holdings that are identified that are in Goodhue County, if there's a willing seller, we would be interested in purchasing those so that we can, and really those are along the river, so we're interested in more of the better river access. The land we have right now won't work, we think, but it's all floodplain, so there's, it's challenging. And then in the far southern part, that in-holding is, there's steep slopes that we would like to bring to the park boundary. And then as far as the land that we already own in the Goodhue County, Dakota County owns that land and it's part of the park, so it's not a partnership park with Goodhue County, it's just a Dakota County park.
How does that work with our 7-county authority?
Don't ask.
Okay, sorry,
No.
I'm intrigued. Okay.
Chair, I
That was
can,
bad.
I did learn that the Goodhue County, so the whole park, which is probably in Met Council records, but is, it started out, there's a church adjacent to the park, and it started out as a church camp, and so that Goodhue and park, the first portions of the park straddled Goodhue and Dakota County and were purchased as when they wanted to sell that camp.
Interesting, okay. That's all. Anyone else? Or we can take your motion.
All right. I'll read it. That's-
Well, you can just say that you moved this and he'll second, then I have to read it again anyway.
All right, I will move the motion as written.
Okay?
And I'll second.
You volunteered before me, but, okay. So that motion is that the Metropolitan Council, 1, approve the Meesville Ravine Park Reserve Long Range Plan, 2, approve the boundary adjustment removing 22 acres of private inholdings and adding a 77 acres of Dakota County owned parkland within the Meesville Ravine Park Reserve boundary. And 3, advise the county to consider implementing the recommendations for solar resources and the Minnesota DNR in the advisory comments section of the business item. Any discussion on that beyond our questioning? I guess as long as we have the county people here, do you have any responses to that bit about solar resources? That's a new thing we've been doing.
Well, I believe we can adjust the plan to suggest exploring it as it with development, with, site development, site concepts. We don't have it in other places, but we're putting solar in other county non-park sites, so there might be more. But anyway, so we'll look at it.
Okay.
And then, the other thing was, the advisory, we'll put the advisory comments from the DNR, which is similar to what they told us in the engagement, so.
Steep slopes.
Yeah. Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor of the motion as made, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. All right, Okay, motion carries, thank you. That will bring us on to information items for the day, starting with the Regional Park System Annual Use Estimate. Go ahead, we have Darcy and a new face to introduce to us.
Would someone mind if we turn the lights on? No?
Oh.
I will.
Good.
My cataracts are beginning to creep in here, you know.
You're not all IT mole people like me?
Thank you. That's better.
All right, go ahead.
Chair, Councilmember Commissioners, my name is Darcy Vandergrift. I am the outgoing parks researcher, and I'm joined here this evening by Ismael Ramirez, who is my new colleague, who is the incoming parks researcher. This is my fifth and final presentation of use estimates to you, starting from 2018. And I'm going to present the use estimates and then introduce my colleague and turn it over to him, who will be project manager of the 2025 visitor study. Sitting at the table, you may have guessed that I'm not leaving the council. I'm moving into a new role as leading qualitative research across the council. But yes, I'm really honored to have this last meeting here sharing this information with you. So we will jump right in. So as many of you know, the use estimates have been produced annually since 1995. We did have a pause in 2020 due to the pandemic. And they are important as they are used in formulas to calculate each implementing agency's share of regional parks and trail system grant program dollars. And it also allows us to monitor trends over time. And this is an important thing to underline because some of the things that we're seeing this year are not a trend over time, they're 1 year. And so that's something important to think about. But this does kind of let us look at what happens over time. And this is one of two ongoing research responsibilities mandated by statute. One is the use estimates and the other one is the visitor study, done approximately every 5 years. And Ismael is going to kick off our conversation about the visitor study here in a bit. So the estimates include data this year from 128 regional parks, trails, park reserves, and special recreation features. And this is the third year of using the multipliers from the 2021 visitor study. And for those of you who might be new to use estimates, we'll talk about that a little bit, about what multipliers are. And this is the final year that the multipliers will be used because next year we'll have an updated visitor study no, actually this year is the final year, so we'll have 1 more year and then they'll be updated. And it's really important to note that annual estimated visitation is really only one way to demonstrate the value of the regional park system. It's the one that comes before you every year and it's tied up in a bow with numbers, but there's really a lot of others that are important, including climate mitigation and public health benefits. So let's talk a little bit about the annual use estimates and how they're calculated. And so this is really a true representation of collaborative interagency work. So we work with the staff of all 10 implementing agencies starting in January, where they identify the entrances, the possible entrances to every park and trail. And from that, we then create a sample of possible times of entrance and possible entrances. And so so the samples that are being created is a sample of entrances and entrance times. And based on this sample, the staff from the implementing agencies count everyone who cross into these entrances. So that includes pedestrians, cyclists, vehicles, buses, boats, people riding horses, and everybody who's entering a regional park and trail at that entrance at that sample time. And these counts are scheduled only during the summer. So we count from Memorial Day to the Saturday of Memorial Day weekend to Labor Day, and it's randomized. So there are 2-hour time slots, just since some folks are new here. They're from 8 to 10 a.m., 10 to noon, noon to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 6. And so the sample is created from that. And in 2023, the council coordinated and implementing agency staff carried out over 2,000 counts in the regional parks and trails across the metro. So you see there in the raw count section, we call these raw counts that they do over the summer. So they will stay at an entrance for 2 hours and say there were 23 pedestrians, 42 cyclists, 2 vehicles. They will turn that in. And those are done at random times, so we have a probabilistic sample, so we can feel confident that every entrance had an equal opportunity for being chosen. Then we take those raw counts from the summer and we do what is called an expansion. So the data are multiplied to use additional calculations to expand to all, not just the sample days and times and entrances, but all of the time slots and all of the entrances. And then we average these with the previous 3 years to account for anomalies in that year. So this year, we're working a lot, Ismail is onboarding with working with flooding at a lot of the entrances and close. Last summer, you remember there was a lot of hazardous conditions due to smoke and due to high temperatures. So we do sort of bring in it's called a 4-year rolling average, so the samples from the prior 4 years. And then finally, we will add in, so after that expansion, we will also expand to estimate the non-summer count visitation as well, so the spring, fall, and winter. And then after we have that estimate, we add in camping and we also add in special events, which is on its way back to normal after the pandemic. Happy to say still hasn't quite reached 2019 levels, but we add that in as well. So let's talk about what the annual estimated visitation is for the regional system. So we estimated that there were 69.4 million system visits in 2023. 49.2 million were from parks and 20.2 million were from trails. And so that's sort of the big takeaway finding. That's really basically flat from the year before. And we think, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but we did not see an increase. We actually saw a slight decrease. But I would argue once you look at all of the elements in terms of sampling and some other things, it's basically flat. So why was visitation flat in 2023? And this is kind of a disappointing thing to bring to you the last year that because we like to be able to say that visitation increases every year. And here are some things. First of all, there's just typical variation in sample counts from year to year. That there could be a big running club that goes through an entrance that one year that results in an increased estimation in the next year. So there's just typical sound variation. But there was also poor air and weather conditions in 2023 that I don't think that we can dismiss. And I'm also unfortunately anticipating that this year with the flooding that we will see another impact of that. But we have to be honest in our methodology that climate shifts affect park visitation. There's also some variation across agencies. As you'll see, some of them were up and some of them are down, and this is typical. We really need to think about trends across time. And there's also, we're seeing, so with that 4-year rolling average with the visitor study multipliers, and this is one thing I wanted to jump in with folks who might be new, is the way that we estimate, one way that we're estimating the visitation is for every vehicle we count, we say there's X number of people who were in that vehicle. And how do we know that? It's because when we do the visitor study, so the last one was in 2021, we ask, how many people, did you come here in a car? And if you did, how many people were in the car with you? On the one hand, we've seen a decline across time. More people are doing things by themselves. If you know Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone, that kind of people are doing things on their own. But also, if you remember what was happening in 2021, people were still engaging in social distancing. And so we believe that there was less likelihood that people would come in big crowds in their vehicles. We will see, that remains to be seen for 2025. So with the 4-year rolling average, every year that we go forward, one of those years with the previous vehicle multipliers from the visitor study rolls off. And we have more years with the vehicle multipliers that were calculated during COVID times. That's one of the reasons why we're doing the visitor study just after 4 years later. Sorry if that was getting a kind of little inside baseball there, but that's one of the reasons we think we have with those lower vehicle multipliers, we also see that flat visitation. But let's jump in and look at our visits by park agency. So here, and this has really remained relatively stable over the years. With Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board having the largest number of visits with 26.4 million. Next 3 rivers, the city of St. Paul, Ramsey County, Anoka, Dakota, Washington County, Carver County, Scott County, and city of Bloomington. So these are calculated in millions. So you can see that, you can just read it as it looks, 26.4 million. And there's not, you'll see in the online report, there were some ups and some downs, but generally, but overall, it was generally flat visitation. We can also share the most visited parks in the system. We had Minneapolis Chain of Lakes is always the most visited park in the system. We did have Mississippi Gorge Regional Park and Central Mississippi Riverfront Regional Park overtake Como Regional Park this year. But still we have kind of robust visitation in all of these parks, and you can see these are the top 10 most popular. For the first time this year, we're sharing out the top 10 trails, and I find it very interesting. First of all, as you probably know, we've added a lot of miles to the trail system, and so I think it's worth it to start looking at trail visitation a little bit more. And one thing that I find pleasing about looking at this, you also see many more implementing agencies represented in this top 10 than in parks, where sort of the concentration of the population in Minneapolis, St. Paul means that most of the parks and trails are there. But here you see the trails. The one thing is, in order to make this visual logical or kind of clean in terms of the way it's laid out, it's a little bit trickier to read the numbers. So these are expressed in the hundreds of thousands. So that is 2.87 million visits to Minnehaha Parkway, 1.1 million visits to Lake Lynx, 950,000 to Cedar Lake, 900,000 to 9 Mile Creek, and so forth until you get to Dakota Rail, and it's 620,000. So actually, that brings me to the end of my presentation, and it's a great pleasure. I turn the baton and the clicker over to my new colleague, Ismael Ramirez, who will tell you about the work he's doing.
Council member, chair, commissioners. As my colleague mentioned, Darcy, I will be taking over some of her duties, and including the use estimates and also the park visitor study. And so as my colleague mentioned, the park visitor study, the purpose of it is to help inform planning, policy, and management, evaluate and strengthen equitable use of regional parks and trails in accordance to Imagine 2050, and update the data and funding formulas to help determine where funding goes for parks and trails. And my colleague Darcy attributed a lot about, talked about multipliers. And this is the part where it comes from. The multipliers will help inform where funding goes for parks and trails. The visitor study, as was mentioned, happens every 5 years. And it helps understanding what is the use of these parks, basically through a survey that will happen next year. Something that is important to mention is that these surveys are incredibly rich source of data, as is quite a bit of a lengthy survey that will be applied. It does meet a lot of implementing agencies' needs, and that is the main reason why I think this study is of particular importance, because it's a collaborative effort among the staff here at the council, the Metropolitan Council, the implementing agencies, and we actually we have started the collaboration with implementing agencies. Especially by the study design. We just finished our first meeting, the kickoff meeting with the LTAC group, where we were able to listen to all the concerns and the needs of data that they require. This is also used to complete the state statute requirements, and this is going to be done, of course, with the input of the LTAC and with consultants. This is a little bit more of a timeline of what I'm expecting to do until spring 2026. This fall and this early this summer and early fall, we're planning to trying to finish the scope of work so we can start the process for hiring a consultant that will be in charge of actually going out and serving the people. All this, of course, with the advisory committee, the LTAC, and also we're expecting to have hired somebody by January. And by that I mean the consultant. Also the pilot study and the summer survey, we're hoping for it to be done by spring. The pilot study will help us understand a little bit more about the process of the survey and all the things that we need to overcome to have a successful survey. And then just like the use estimates, the summer survey will happen during the summer at the same time, during Memorial Day and Labor Day. And we're hoping to have the results discussed and published all throughout fall of 2025 and spring of 2026. With the data analysis and workshops curated specifically for every implementing agency, because we want to show what are their numbers and how they refer to them specifically. And also we will have the new multipliers by fall 2025 that will also inform the use estimates of that year. And we hope to complete the publication of this lengthy study by winter of 2025 and spring of 2026. So yeah, that's everything else.
Okay.
Yes, excuse me, someplace along the way, I missed the definition of LTAC.
Yep, that is, council member, chair, commissioners, LTAC means the local technical advisory committee. That it is comprised of leaders from all the implementing agencies. So we form a committee and we make decisions based on their needs and requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Sue?
Darcy, congratulations. I hope this is a fun move for you. I want to thank you for these reports. I have to say that this presentation was always my favorite every year. I love the kind of work that you guys do, and I'm rethinking my career now, although it's probably a little too late. But, I have a strange question. Has there ever been, have the parks agencies ever taken a look at the number of K-12 or pre-K-12 school groups that come to their parks on an annual basis? I'm just curious because has been and continues to be such an emphasis on the benefits of getting kids out in nature to learn about, the earth sciences. So I'm curious as to whether those counts have ever occurred.
Yeah, Councilmember, Chair, Commissioners. So one difference between, the use estimate counts people without talking to them and the visitor study use survey people. Those data probably do live to some extent in the special events data.
Okay.
And I've always thought it would be interesting to sort of analyze who's coming with the special events, because as you know, one of the recommendations for the young leaders for the regional development guide is a goal of like all fifth graders visiting a regional park or something like that. So I think that it's frankly a capacity issue of not being able to delve into those use estimate, although those special events data, although implementing agencies do submit school group visits.
I think it would be
Mostly.
an interesting piece of research to have, because there are a lot of nonprofits and individuals who have foundations who will help support those kinds of programs. And it's so invaluable to the schools to have those opportunities. I mean, there's just nothing that beats it. I've probably told this story so many times that some of you probably just dread hearing it again, but remember being down at the nature sanctuary here in St. Paul one day with a group of fourth graders. And this little boy came running up to me and he said, Mrs. Vento, you won't believe what I saw here. And I said, what did you see? And he said, a grasshopper. This was a fourth grader who had never seen a grasshopper, or at least didn't know he had. And it was just remarkable, and it's something that I'll probably go to my grave repeating that story, because it really, it felt good to hear that from this little guy. He was really excited. And he said to me before he walked away, he said, I'm gonna bring my mom and dad down here. They need to see this. And that's the other benefit of getting kids in the parks. They help get the family in the parks, so.
Wonderful, sorry.
Yes, David?
Sure. I just have I mean, this seems like a lot of work to put together and a lot of time spent counting and so forth. And I'm just wondering, what, has there been any thought, and maybe there already is in this, in terms of using technology, the cameras that can count people, that maybe they even have AI now that can discern who is what and who came from a car and whatever, and use that. I don't know, like, I'll just let you respond.
Council member, chair, commissioners, it makes my heart skip a beat to think of a newspaper article that the Met Council is using AI to count people. I'm not sure how that would go. But we have had, I really hear, it is a very labor intensive effort, and we did have, if you indulge in going into the streetlight story. So we did, for a while, there was a technology of cleaned and privatized anonymized cell phone data through something called Streetlight that was used for transportation planning. And there was aspirations to not replace the use estimate, but at least test drive this. And there's actually a dashboard that was developed that I could send it to you. It was done, there was a legacy funding that was used to develop, to kind of test drive using Streetlight for visitation for DNR, Greater Minnesota, and does everybody already know this story? Am I?
No.
And DNR and the regional parks. There were a couple of challenges that made it not perfectly comparable to the use estimate. So for example, trails could only be done accurately in trail miles, driven and ridden rather, and not people, which would make it difficult since we're asked to count. And also cell phone companies tightened up their privacy standards in 2021 and essentially cut off this data source. There are trail counters, and some agencies use those trail counters. It's not, you can't put a trail, you can't estimate use for an entire trail based on a couple of trail counters, although you can get very accurate counts at that site, but you can't do the large system. And with parks, the entrances, it's hard, like you imagine sort of a main gate at a park to get a counter to work there. There's not that technology. I think that this question needs to be asked periodically, because I'll just tell you another problem with this method is that we would have to use about 10,000 hours of staff time if we were able to calculate visitation that's accurate with an acceptable margin of error at individual parks and trails. And everybody wants individual park and trail data. So all of that to say, that's a really great question. At this point, we don't have the technology.
I guess I just was curious, because if dollars are tied to it, and they are, then I would assume that the importance goes up. And if the importance goes up, then being accurate, as accurate as possible, I would assume that drives, making sure that the data is good. And even if it's, like you said, verifying that the current process is still sound, and maybe that continues, and it's just done in a few select areas just to verify it or something.
Yeah, and I encourage you to look at the methodology report. I think we can feel confident that it is equally valid everywhere. That there's the one thing that might be different is that we know our fall, spring, and winter visitation based on what our people tell us in the visitor study, and it's very hard to know how many times you've visited a park throughout the year. So like a park with a lot of skiing might have different, like that multiplier might be a bit off. But otherwise, it's equally valid everywhere, even if it's not like perfectly precise everywhere. But we say that the margin of error is plus or minus 5% at the agency level. But I appreciate the question.
Yeah,
As you could maybe tell, we've talked about it a lot.
Yeah, for sure you have.
Yeah, it's basically been a kind of three-pronged problem of getting something that is accurate and is accurate on the same metrics we care about, which are not necessarily the same metrics that some kind of tool was designed for, and that isn't going to make people freak out about privacy problems, including myself, for the record. Because working in IT, I am not a big fan of AI stuff. It freaks me out, I know too much. But
Yeah, and I didn't mean that to scare anybody, I just
no,
was.
yeah, you're right.
Maybe not AI, but just like smarter.
What can we do? Yeah.
Yeah, what a way to differentiate, like if you have a camera, can it like discern how many people are coming from a parking lot because it's a wide area or whatever, because it's,
Yeah.
You always want to have that kind of that cattle gate or whatever you want to call it, that they, narrowly going in to be able to count, but well, you don't have that in a lot of parks, so it's just hard to keep track.
And there is some stuff that's close to doing that. Some of it is probably more expensive than we can afford. Some of it is not necessarily designed to have the privacy protections we want. And some of it is just aimed at a different kind of problem.
Right.
A lot of things are trying to identify a particular person rather than counting numbers. So there's, and then of course the problem with parks, there might be 9 different defined entrances and then various neighborhood accesses that are, who knows what.
Unknown, yeah.
But and with our new person, the other staff have heard us beat this dead horse before, but now you can start being the one receiving it. I think the biggest one for me probably is we're making a lot of assumptions based on just summer usage. And that's definitely a gap, in particular when we start talking about winter stuff where some of our park units might have lit ski trails or manufactured snow and things like that. It's just being able to say that everything's gonna be the same across the board is probably not really accurate. And I don't know what kind of capacity we have to fix that. Mostly it's we've gotta look to our council members and say, give them more money to do that. We want better data, right?
Yeah, I was thinking, because how the weather is changing, it might be a good idea to start making this study in fall, not really all the way winter, not all the way. Because most families now, one of the parents work from home, so we don't need to wait for the weekend to go to the park with the family. A lot of people I know, when running a daycare is very complicated nowadays because they want to take their kids to the park in the middle of the morning and then bring them back for a nap, and it's not that easy, it's just get the kid out of school, go to park, come back, so things like that. I think moving the timing of the study might be interesting. The other thing I would like to see is if we can, kind of like what you're saying, Darcy, instead of just measuring numbers of visitors, find another way to measure the use of the parks. And this will also help for us to know how people learn about the parks, because to me the most visited parks is very simple. They are the ones that everybody knows or hear about. So everybody has a certain knowledge that Minnehaha Falls has a very nice trails. You go and walk there, or the Minneapolis chain of lakes is very famous, and Komsu is also very famous. So if we find another way to measure how the parks get people in, that could be another factor to tell you, well, this is visitors because we're doing something different. I don't know, the only part that I can remember from Dakota County right now is the one with the bisons on it. And I know a lot of people who has gone, including myself, all the way there just to see the bison. And that's the reason that I'm going there. That's the only reason that I know is there. So it will be kind of interesting to figure out. Of course, it's very easy for you. How I'm telling you is not artificial intelligence. You do it and let me know how it works.
Councilmember and Chair and Commissioner, I will say, so what we can know, we always want to look at trends over time. So we have a big spike one year, that could be a sampling anomaly. But for example, we do look at units that have increase, a market increase over years. So one thing that we know for sure, for example, is that Carver County had big investments in Lake Waconia with the Coney Island of the West. And sure enough, they've had an increase in visitation there. So we do look at those things and share what we see with the implementing agencies. And then there is an opportunity, and I will jump in because I did the last visitor study, and Ismail, you might have something to add. In the visitor study, we do ask people, how did you get information about the park? What kind of information do you want to see? And we looked a lot at differences between first-time visitors and frequent visitors to see sort of what those differences were. And so those questions, and it's helpful, and maybe when Ismail comes back to talk, it's helpful to hear what you're interested in, because that could help to know what kinds of questions to dive into for the survey analysis.
Yeah, the other big thing to call out in terms of individual park units, I think, is for the last few years, we've had this competitive equity grant program where people are doing particular projects that sometimes they're across an agency, but a lot of them are at one or two parks or trails, things like that. And we'd like to know, are those investments making a difference? And figuring out how we would measure that has been an open question still. To be like, well, okay, so we spent some money here, 10 years later, can we come back and say, was there a statistically valid, measurable difference in anything? Did we accomplish something to show that those dollars are doing good? That's gonna be a hard thing to get good data for. But if we have the ability to do some targeted things, that's probably where we wanna start, besides just the, and you also made a good point that I did, when we started talking years ago about the winter multiplier problem, we were mostly looking at it from a recreation standpoint. But Monica brings up a good point that climate change issues might be changing just these spring and fall ones compared to summer, because if things are flooded or super hot or you're choked out by wildfire smoke, maybe you go do something in October instead of July.
And winter use is increasing.
Yeah.
So that's the other, I think that's what we're seeing, is that that more temperate is bringing actually more people out longer or earlier, however we look at that, relative to winter use. So that's something that's happening. And I think, I think this, actually, the conversation is really pointing to why we don't use AI, right? Because you can't get the nuance of that kind of information in terms of a first-time user, why did you come, how did you, all those kind of things. And I think even with the equity grant, and the measure of that, I think one of the things for us is not did you come, but did you come back? And so I think that relative to usage, for us around first-time users, and then a second-time use. There's something that we do that we ask relative to populations, because that's really kind of our success, right? You can bribe anybody to come once, right? And I think, I'm being a little flippant, but I think sometimes the equity work we do is almost like a bribe. There's something that is a very targeted, investment in getting you to come, and then the question is, do you gain, the ability to come back? And I would say that our heavy users, and I think that a heavy user who skis 3 times a week, I don't know if that's significantly different than a heavy user that walks from their house and eats at Lake Harriet 3 times a week. Or, the urban parks that have a great playground, or any of them, and that's a whole nother thing, and we're looking at some of the parks, choose Washington County, that place is a playground for the families who live nearby. They get up and they drive down to the beach and they hang out at the lake, and so we wouldn't count that as different. And so I think that those things are actually unique ways that the regional park system is changing in some regards. It really is interesting, and I think the Waconia and what's happening in Victoria, all those, there's a lot happening in the regional park system that is actually pretty interesting relative to the way it serves not just the community who's driving 30 miles, but the one who's driving really close, because we're serving their desire to be outdoors with their family more often in a regular way. And so it's just an interesting element to the way that the system is evolving.
I might put an ask to staff. I know things might be different coming from this commission than from you running it up your management chain. So it might be good to put together something of like, what would it actually take in terms of resources and other support to get the data that this commission has been asking for? You know, not necessarily just you wanting to do more, but there's particular questions that we've posed over the years. And would it be useful for us to potentially have a resolution that we pass out of MPOSC at some point to CDC saying, hey, we'd be interested in this and this and this for the Parks Department staff and implementing agencies to accomplish these kinds of goals for measuring stuff for our purposes.
You know, Tony, is there something related to that too, where we also, you know, that resolution or we do also is driven through our relationship with the implementing agencies? Because I feel there's I don't know, you know what I mean, is there something that is useful to them, that as we do this, there's just
Probably, yeah, I don't
Just
know a lot
collaboration.
about how the division of labor and funding and stuff related to this data works, but I think there probably is some component to that where I know also that some of our implementing agencies do data collection of their own that's actually more detailed than ours.
Yeah.
But we can't always use it because it then doesn't match up to other agencies that don't have the same thing. So there's probably some way that we can do this more efficiently, and I don't know exactly what it is, partly because I took one stats class in college and that was more than enough for me. So in terms of like, what does it take to be statistically valid? I don't know and I don't wanna know. I would like to have somebody else do it for me.
Well, the presentation today in terms of the process, I think was actually really good. And I don't, you know, I think something for, you know, the new commissioners, I mean, that actually, what that count means, how we create it is actually great to see, because it is, for the implementing agencies, it's a real thing. You know, so for the group that you represent and how the money is distributed, it has real financial consequences in terms of what they're doing. So they're also designing and developing programming and things to increase that count, and they want to see the benefit of that, right? And maybe that's, even if the numbers are growing in certain ways, it gives us the ability to try to grow the pie. And I think from a legislative standpoint, and I do think that the people's access to the legislature, and I would say has really changed dramatically in the last 2 sessions. I think where community members and community organizations see that they have access to their legislatures and can influence, you know, what's happening, is interesting for us to do the work that actually creates a groundswell from our community that begins to say, maybe the LCCMR needs to be bigger. You know, that the regional park needs to be bigger. You know, we need to come up with something more, and I think that even the work that you all are working on in terms of the DNR and the collaboration around increased funding, I think an element of that that's missing is that the community isn't asking for it, right? That's an element that would really empower the community to be behind, you know, the work that you are doing. And maybe that's something we commit to organize out of this, is we need to have our own rally, you know, at the Capitol, right? And do something very public and something very big in a way that aligns the implementing agencies, the regional park system, and community members and organizations, where we want to grow that funding, which funding increases collaboration, right? Or at least decreases competition.
And one thing that I can say is, like, compared to the way things often go in the legislature, we don't have to deal with a lot of like fighting back and forth between our implementing agencies over money,
Right.
because so much of our stuff is distributed by formulas. But for that arrangement to work, those formulas need to be calculated accurately in a way that everybody is reasonably happy with, or at least equally unhappy with. So certainly, we've been bringing up issues that we see. If any implementing agencies are approaching us and saying that they think there's a problem in formulas, certainly I hope you would let us know before that becomes a problem. I don't think it has yet, but yeah, when we're talking about, well, maybe this isn't quite as good as we'd like, we'd certainly like to catch that early and make sure that we're keeping it up enough so that everybody is on the same page. Because it makes our job a lot easier.
Chair, could I do a quick poll of the commissioners before we lose Anthony Taylor? Because we have, Sandy and I are looking out a few months. The Thursday falls in January, on January 2nd. We'd like to propose moving the meeting to January 9th, and are wondering whether that would be okay with the commissioners. January 2nd, change it to January 9th.
Sure.
I
Sounds
believe
good.
either day
Yes.
would be fine for me.
Thank you, sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
And can I just say thank you very much? I also like this report.
And I'm sure if you want to read all the nitty-gritty details, it's available somewhere.
It was published online today, so you can, yeah.
There you go.
And I will send, Commissioner Dix, I'll send you that streetlight dashboard
Yeah.
if you're interested.
I know it's something that I think a lot of parks struggle with in terms of like, how do we keep track of, and, you know, even like something simple like having pickleball courts, you know that they're hot. How do you know that they're hot? Because the recreation administrator that's dealing with it is taking all kinds of calls, like, oh,
Yeah.
like, you know, like, it's sometimes
It's
like.
anecdotal.
Right, the data just isn't there to, and I think we're all kind of saying the same thing, the more data we can have, the better we can project and be able to say to, you know, constituencies that, hey, this program over here, this is working, we should do more of this, that kind of thing.
Great.
Sure. I just wanted to reiterate what Darcy said. We're super excited that Ismail is here. The great news for all of us is that Darcy will remain here. Darcy's heart is in the qualitative world, but she has done a phenomenal job on the quantitative world of the parks research. So we're very grateful to both of you. But thank you, Darcy.
So are you still doing, you're doing stuff across the whole council? Are you also still doing qualitative stuff for parks?
Yes, as I'm requested to, and I will be on the project team for the visitor study.
So this is not the last time we'll see you?
No.
Okay.
Darcy will be around.
And welcome,
Just
Ismail.
I wanted to make that.
Look forward to
Darcy,
working with you.
you've got
more.
access.
All right. That will move us on to our next information item, which is yet another update on the regional parks and trails policy stuff.
It's gonna end, it really will. It just won't right now.
Well, and it will, and then we'll start over for the next one.
Yeah.
It's continuous.
This really sounds like, when you're waiting for the new Game of Thrones books and it still doesn't come out. What's happening?
It's almost here, Monica.
That's what he say too.
Oh, what is that other one, R.R. Martin one that they've been waiting on for
Yep.
ages?
That one.
Good afternoon, commissioners. I'm Emmett Mullen, Regional Parks Manager. Thank you for being here. We have a 15-minute presentation today. We'll keep it to that. We are making tremendous progress as we march through the policy plan. Thank you for your patience with it. We're going to go to the first slide. So in spring, we sort of committed to an approach to get through each section of the Parks Policy Plan, and this is our schedule. Today, we're looking at the system plan, the planning requirements, and system protection. So, after we share the full draft with you on August 1st, we're going to be bringing it to the full council on August 14th. So August 14th is when the council authorizes the public comment draft. So that'll be a big step. You're all pretty good at reading, so I won't go through this with you in any greater detail other than to say the public comment period will be open from that August 15th to October 7th. Then we'll collect all of our public comments and we will go through them and we will respond to them. And we will be publishing like a public comment report as well as rework the draft based on what we learned. Always a lot of good suggestions there. This next slide is for Kevin, right?
Thank you, Emmett. So as mentioned previously, we met with you, the commissioners, last month to discuss 3 specific areas, which were natural systems, climate resiliency, and the 60% draft of the Regional Parks and Trails Plan Handbook. So overall, it seemed that there was generally a positive reaction and commissioners were able to provide some input for refining and making sure that this is the best product that we can offer. So overall, throughout the entire presentation, some recommendations were to kind of double check for consistency in both terminology, so checking the terms Indigenous and American Indian, but to also ensure that we're being consistent with our demographic listings. As mentioned, there was some inconsistencies between age 60 and over or 65 years and older, and trying to just smooth that out and ensure that we are being consistent. Other things that were mentioned was accessibility and consideration for icons that are being used in the final document, specifically ensuring that they are able to be processed by a text-to-speech reader, and just ensuring accessibility throughout the entire document. Within the system plan and natural systems, some folks were very appreciative of the idea of the historical landscapes subclassification, and other recommendations were to consider additional metrics associated with water, and this was as we were presenting some of the metrics that were being presented for climate resiliency, which leads us to our next category. For climate resiliency, there was some support and encouragement to continue developing these metrics that we presented last month, which were mostly baseline carbon sequestration figures, and to continue developing those metrics. And then another thing that was mentioned was to kind of reinforce the idea that we want to provide better access to public transit, as it has many different climate benefits. Within system protection, there was some vague language that was pointed out in the introductory section, and that was just recommended to be clarified in future iterations. And then lastly, in planning, specifically around the planning requirements, people appreciated the proposed inclusion of the cultural resource inventory and wanted to ask for further development of these standards. In addition to meeting with MPOSC last month, we also met with our implementing agency partners, and this was to mostly highlight the 60% draft of the Regional Parks and Trails Planning Handbook. Agencies mostly had generally shared same sentiments that you, the commissioners, have voiced, but had also deviated on some items that we'll get to in a little bit. So generally they expressed support for the proposed subclassifications, so both the cultural landscapes and the historical landscape subclassifications. And one thing that some agencies had mentioned was that they just wanted us to consider the any potential unintended consequences or impacts to these classifications, specifically an example around balancing historic preservation while also allowing for improvements to the regional parks and trails system. For the planning requirements, one of the things that was mentioned was the cultural resources inventory component or requirement in the long-range plan requirements. And there were generally some concerns about it just because this is a very expensive process, and they wanted more clarification or guide rails to instruct what the council is looking for specifically. So with these recommendations, there might be some consideration for putting this specific component or requirement on hold as we further develop the details and requirements of this specific item. Now I'll pass it over to Tracy to go over the system plan.
Great, thanks, Kevin. System plan. Okay, so as Kevin and Emmett mentioned, in today's presentation, we're going to discuss the significant changes in Section 2, System Plan, Section 5, Planning, and Section 6, System Protection. I'll start with Section 2, System Plan. Just a reminder, the system plan includes the maps and lists of all the regional parks and trails in the system by implementation phase. This includes parks and trails that are open to the public, planned, and search. The system plan also includes those park and trail classifications. So today, we're gonna talk a little bit more about the cultural landscapes and the historical landscape subclassification. So one advancement from the 60% policy chapter is the subclassifications found in section 2 of the system plan. The subclassifications were advanced with the advice from you, the Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Committee, and the implementing agencies, as well as the American Indian Advisory Council. Overall, we heard from the comments to remove recreation from special recreation features to add more flexibility, add cultural landscapes as a subclassification of special features to integrate these important areas into our existing classifications, and add a subclassification for historical landscapes to recognize and protect landscapes with a notable design style, historical event, activity, or people reflects development patterns over time. Then I'll note that we did receive great advice from the implementing agencies in relation to the natural systems and open space subclassification. We will be developing the subclassification in partnership with MPOS and the implementing agencies after the plan is considered by council in February of 2025. So first, let's start with the special feature subclassification cultural landscape. These areas will recognize and protect culturally significant landscapes, including American Indian burial grounds. They will not require that recreation be a part of that unit, and may be designed to protect areas of significant cultural or sacred meaning to groups. This includes protecting these spaces and designing them to limit public access and foot traffic. The next proposed special feature subclassification is historical landscapes. These areas recognize or protect a historically significant landscape associated with a notable design style, historical event, activity, or people, or reflects development patterns over time. They do not require that recreation be a part of the unit, and that they may be designed to protect areas of significant historic meaning to groups. This includes protecting these areas and designing them to limit public access and foot traffic. We heard from our agency partners that this subclassification needs more discussion as well. So we are considering moving this subclassification to section 9, our future work plan, to be further developed. Now I'll pass it to Emmett to discuss plan requirements.
Alrighty, the plan requirements. Well, you've got a primer today as you listen to the Meesville Ravine Park Reserve plan. So that's why this section is really important. It's kind of one of our bread and butter areas. Because many of these requirements are the same or nearly the same for all implementing agency, for all parks, park reserves, trails, and special recreation features, we decided to try to do a little bit of consolidation to streamline them. As we discussed before, there's a policy plan and there's a planning handbook. The planning handbook is for the more procedural, administrative stuff. The details of the planning requirements is going to reside in the handbook. They'll be referenced in the plan. I'm not exactly sure how today, but we're really nailing that down over the next few weeks. But we've taken those plan requirements, which are on the left, which is what exists, and we've clumped them into 3 groups around engagement, development concept, and natural systems. And I know you heard from Colin last month in greater detail, so I won't cover too much more. But I just wanted you to let you know that the changes we made in partnership with the regional park implementing agencies. We sat with the planners and said, okay, well, what's working here, what's not? In the engagement section, we recognized that there was some streamlining that could be done, particularly in terms of like public participation, the equity analysis, demand forecast, public awareness, that was really streamlined. I'm going to say then for the development concept, the second one, That's proposed to include boundaries, acquisition costs, development concept, accessibility, and public services. Because there are some differences between how we do plans for parks, that's the tree, and trails, that's the bike, there will be a slight difference in terms of what is required, but largely they're similar. Then the final grouping is around natural systems. That has the stewardship plan, natural systems, and the Mississippi Corridor critical area. This past month, I don't know if you remember, but we had cultural resources in that section. We are going to put that over, we're proposing to move that over into the work plan just because we need to take a little bit more time with that concept so that we move forward and do it right. You've heard many of the agencies are already out of the gate on that one. Dakota County is working closely with the tribal historic preservation officers. People are doing the work. We just want to make sure that we're clearly delineating what our expectations are. And then my final slide today is around Section 5, long-range plan amendment processes. We are just more clearly delineating 3 amendment types. You folks learned a lot about this over this past year. There's 3 basic types. There's the full amendment. This is what you do when you really want to restart or re-envision a plan. It really involves substantial changes in the development concept, boundaries, and so forth. The focused amendments, those are done when there's really just a part of a park is changing, and then we go into sort of I call it the let's make a deal, but it's the negotiation with the regional park implementing agencies in terms of working with them to understand what exactly is changing, what sections still have currency today and don't need to be updated, what sections do. Well, that's the focused amendment. So it's a subset of all those ones we just saw. And then finally, the administrative process for minor amendments. We brought this through you a few months ago and got some great advice. We have a process that we are using today. True or false, Tracy?
True.
Yeah, because we were working on that today. But this is just for amendments that are minor in nature, have minimal impact on the park or trails recreation opportunities. So we've established that, and we will just bring this into the plan and the handbook for clarity's sake. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Tracy for the final section in system protection.
Thanks, Emmett. Okay, so system protection. Section 6 is system protection. This section outlines how the council protects the regional parks and trails lands through comprehensive planning, land conversions, and utility easements. So the system protection policy in this section is largely unchanged. This includes both the policies and the actions. There were a few refinements made to this section based on agency comments. Actions 2 and 3 aim to clarify our existing practices for land conversions and utilities. Action 2, land conversions, clarifies which proposals do not require an equally valuable exchange because of the benefits to the unit or no impact. So you might recall the big marine land conversion, and for those who didn't experience that, essentially it was a relatively small land conversion that was looking at improving the big marine lake through some wetland or some land improvements, erosion improvements, and that was a huge benefit to the water quality. Therefore, it did not require an equally valuable exchange. It was also relatively minor in scope. Action 3, other utilities. This clarifies the council's utility easement process and that it is consistent with other land conversion processes. Previously, there was a note in there that agencies should work with the utility provider And we modified the language to bring it more into alignment with current work processes today, because truly we consider that more of a land conversion process unless it's not considered that. We just modified the language there. So that sums up the changes for section 6, system protection. So now it's your turn. Here are some questions on the slide. The questions we have for you today are: what excites you about the new changes being proposed? Is there anything missing from these sections? And what recommendations do you have for council staff? If you have any questions, we're here to hear them.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, responses to those? I have some thoughts while you think. With regard to the agency comments about cultural resource inventory clarification, I know when we are doing environmental impact analysis stuff, there's a language of like a stage 1 or a stage 2, I forget exactly what it's called.
Phase 1 and phase 2.
Yeah. Is there any sort of similar like industry common language about levels of cultural resource kinds of stuff that we could reference, or is this something we have to define from scratch?
I'll start, Chair and Commissioners. This is why we need to put it in the work plan and have a little bit more conversation. There are federal laws around cultural resource protection and interpretation, and we would really benefit from understanding the expectations for that. We are not looking to duplicate that in any way. However, we're looking to understand that and then set up expectations so that agencies can move forward in ways like they already are today, like Dakota County today talking about working with their new tribal liaison who's working with Sioux Agency on doing the mapping process and identification of sensitive areas. Like, we just want to set realistic expectations, but we're not looking to duplicate like the federal 106 requirements for historic preservation. Like, that's just not needed because it already exists and it's overseen by others.
I'm just trying to figure out, is like, are there definitions of this is kind of a basic kind of thing you do here, and then if you find this, then you go into doing this level like we do with our environmental ones? Or is it that maybe there's a framework for that, but we don't even have the expertise on the framework to understand what might apply to us, kind of thing?
I think so. My one comment is, like, I can tell you that one of the real strong suits of our regional park implementing agencies is their natural resource protection and commitment. And they're really good at the natural resources inventory. There's a lot of resources out there from the Department of Natural Resources, watershed districts and so, that they pull in a lot of that information to set a baseline. I think they're gonna be doing, I think that there's a similar approach for the cultural resources inventory that I think agencies will really help us understand and then set expectations for.
Yeah, it seems like we're on the same like very general page talking about what we think we might be going for. I just don't know if we have common language to define it, to make sure that Scott County thinks it's the same thing that Washington County does, kind of a thing. Like if we say we want, you know, the basic stuff, but don't go crazy, but you know, we need this level of detail. How do we put that in writing in a way that everyone understands what it actually means, right? I don't know what that looks like. So it sounds like, lots of work to do.
What you said is really what our goal is, Tony, is to all get on the same page in terms of setting expectations for this. But the Cedar Lake plan, I don't know if you remember, you know, Minneapolis talking about how they were working with tribal and, you know, historic preservation officers to really understand what was important and how to sort of encourage public use away from those areas.
Well, and that raises the other issue of if there are existing definitions of this, they're probably written by government entities and they may or may not actually be good.
We're gonna work on it.
Yeah, okay. Bob?
Mr. Chair and the Commission, what strikes me about, I mean, I like where you're moving. It also strikes me that have we done anything, or should we be planning to do some training to bring, just like you guys were talking, the implementing agencies into some sense of consensus as to what the requirements are, or what this legislation demands, or what is a good sense about what we're talking about. So I guess I'm saying, do we have any provisions, either here at the council or monetarily, for training of our implementing agencies?
Well, they might logistically even be training our staff more than our staff are training them at this point. But yeah, something, and also I'm thinking, once we decide on whatever these requirements should be and where they're coming from, maybe kind of a workshop for us to understand what we're looking at.
Yeah.
Because it's certainly not my area of expertise.
Chair and commissioners, we do have opportunities to bring in experts in this area. The State Historic Preservation Officer is someone we consult with. We speak with them when issues do arise. And then we also, do you remember when Frankie Jackson came in with the City of St. Paul and spoke to you? He's a longtime tribal historic preservation officer that was working with the city around Indian mounds and sort of transformation of that park. He's amazingly knowledgeable and practical, and those are the types of resources I think that we do have. And you're right, Bob, that expertise resides in many places, and we could bring it in. And I like the idea of MPOS training potentially too.
It may be worth adding some clause in here or some statement that we support and will facilitate building knowledge, both within the Met Council and our implementing agencies, on this area of cultural sensitivity.
Yeah, and especially if we have any implementing agencies that are coming to us saying, hey, we actually don't have expertise in that yet, and you're giving us a new mandate, make sure that we're reassuring them that we'll help them figure out how to do that. And certainly several of them are more experienced in it than we are at this point, but there are probably some of the smaller ones that might be saying,
Less experienced.
we don't have that yet, and we need to cross-train somehow between our agencies.
If I can add on that, because it's not work at all, it will be also a great opportunity to teach the users about it. Like, I like how there is no required recreation in historical or cultural landscape. That's great, because those are other kind of places, like, you're not supposed to just go and play in historical sites. But I think, as we're training the staff or we're learning, it will be nice to find a way to share it with the public. Because if we're gonna, limit the general public access, they are gonna raise some questions that, well, this is public land, I can't just walk whatever or something like that. I understand they might want some privacy in some stuff, but it could be a good opportunity for, to teach how to behave in certain areas, right? And maybe it will be also going to natural, prairie restoration. You should not be running around and destroying the ones, kind of. I don't know.
And that ties into some stuff we've talked about a little bit before in terms of like what can the council do in our role in marketing to the public and stuff. I've brought up before the idea of having some materials on our website explaining what the process is for like long range plan amendments, and how you get involved and when and who do you talk to. But another piece of that could be explaining what kinds of things are considered when doing these, like who's looking at what, and there's the public engagement things, there's the cultural resource things, there's the natural resources things. How does that all come together? Maybe, this is all just giving you guys work to do, but like a series of videos on the council website tied off to YouTube or whatever for like explaining what you guys do all day kind of thing. It's like, hey public, this is how we create a plan, this is how we decide where to put a new trail, this is how we decide to put a new park, what kind of facilities should be there. This is all the stuff that comes in, and where you can get involved and where certain kinds of experts get involved, and we could just have a whole series of stuff that people could go watch to understand how this all works. that could certainly be a big piece of it,
Yeah, I like that. Create awareness of everything and then
you know, in your free
if you
time.
can make it like a cartoonish, very cute idea, yeah. Or bring a celebrity to do the videos, that'll work too.
Make it entertaining.
Yeah.
We're gonna do TikTok probably.
Yes.
Kevin? That's actually a really interesting idea. I like the idea of being more transparent in terms of how we work, what we do.
I will feel, you know, personally concerned if I don't bring this up because one of our commissioners is not here, but are we gonna keep the bicycle for trails? Or we're gonna have, you know, a hiker, just a backpack somewhere?
We actually had a robust conversation about that. And we kept the bicycle because most trail use is on bicycle. There's pedestrians, but it is the majority of use on our regional trails is bicycles.
I have nothing against bicycle, but we know someone might have.
Yes, Cecily
I
will
thought about
have
that
beef, but we have data.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because we're open to change. That's the truth.
Yeah.
Maybe we put a backpack on the bicycle, so. No.
We can do that.
With the special feature classifications, like historically, those came in as a way of kind of shoehorning in some stuff that predated the system in a lot of ways, or some other things that came up. And now, the more we kind of refine that, the more it kind of makes sense for other parts of the system and sort of fits into the whole thing. But something that probably needs to go into our future work plan is that's also making me realize that some of these might kind of overlap with things. So like the idea of you might have a park reserve that then contains a special feature within it. And we don't have anything that really addresses that kind of thing, like within or adjacent to or something. Maybe we want to draw boundaries to have different kinds of management plans for certain areas near something. And like, does it count as part of the acreage for a park, or is it sort of its own thing, or is it a little bit of both? That whole can of worms is unanswered, and I don't expect to be answered by August. But that's probably something we need to start thinking about, because the more you go into some of these new sub-classifications, the more I'm thinking, well, maybe that also kind of fits in with some of our parks or some of our trails, or like we've had some places where a trail corridor is widened to include some spot. Like, well, maybe that's actually some kind of a sub-classification of a special feature that's adjacent to the trail. And we've just kind of done funky things along the way because we didn't have a good way of doing that. And maybe this is an opportunity to figure that out in the next 8 years.
Slippery slope, but yes.
Yeah.
No, we're right in it, Tony.
Yeah, and like you see that in, to some extent, DNR things. You'll have state parks or state forests that include a wildlife management area or a scientific and natural area inside of them or adjacent to them. And it makes sense in their system. How it works for ours, I have no idea, but it's the same kind of idea. And sometimes there's different, we don't have this as much, like DNR classifications have different rules where, you know, maybe having something designated as an SNA means that you can't have this kind of development or can't have this kind of use. Some places designate whether they have hunting or not, and we don't deal with any of that, so I don't know how much of it is relevant to us, but some of those classifications might change something for us.
Yeah, nested units, yes.
In the section 5, the amendment process, you know, the full amendment, folks amendment, these are the ones that we were talking a while ago, and then are they gonna have a finance requirement? Did you decide that? Do we have a limited, or we're not gonna mention any cost? Cause
Great question.
Oh,
Again, this is for focused amendments, whether or not they include costs, I would say if what they're doing with the amendment has significant monetary implications, they need to update the finance part. And that's exactly what we do when we meet with the agencies and talk about what elements do you need to bring into this new plan. So great question.
I think part of what you might be getting at one point, many meetings ago, when we were looking at the actual criteria for the different categories, we debated at length whether one of those criteria should be a monetary threshold. If it changes the cost by this much, then it's no longer minor or that kind of thing, and I honestly don't remember what we ended up deciding on that.
I don't remember what we decided on it, but it's that one, because it was, I don't know, I will say it was 1 million, and then we were, well,
You changed the threshold, you lowered it actually
oh,
for it, so,
me?
yes.
I think you did, yeah.
Well,
No,
it's
it's
fine.
Tony and you, so.
Yeah, I will blame Tony on
Okay, that's fine.
it. Yeah.
I was also wondering with the amendment stuff, if there's any consideration to the age of the overall plan. I'm wondering, are we gonna get into a situation where things are done as a series of minor or focused things and never get the chance to really trigger the full revision? Because I know this again is a cost to the agencies, of course, but we have some plans that are 40, 50 years old, and if they don't have some sort of impetus to update that, they may or may not get to it, depending on what their budgets are. And so I'm wondering, like, if something comes in as a minor amendment that like it would meet all the other criteria for minor, but the plan that it's amending is more than X years old, then we just need to do a full update anyway, just because it's due, and that's kind of a, I'm thinking like the way that certain kinds of home improvements trigger, well, you have to bring that up to code first, kind of a thing. Is that something that we want to include or consider? We haven't asked the implementing agencies about that before, of what would that impact be on you financially? Because I know it's significant, but it might be a good thing to think about, how do we make sure that our overall plans don't get too aged?
I think that makes good sense.
I have no idea what the threshold should be, I'm just thinking, maybe there ought to be something.
Yeah, for that, I would say, I would definitely wanna have a conversation with the implementing agencies before doing anything like that,
Yeah.
and have some collaboration there.
Oh, they're gonna probably hate us if we say, oh yeah, you wanna change that your plan is 4 years old, you bring everything.
Yeah.
Because I, as a former architect, I will tell you, I hate when they tell me, yeah, you have to change all the plumbing if you wanna change it. It's like, really?
Yeah.
Thanks.
And it's like, of course, we would love if every long-range plan across the entire system was like less than 10 years old, but obviously that's not reasonable. But the ones that are, 50 years old, I think the agencies all recognize that's not great. Because it also impacts, what they can do. They're like, well, we want to put in this thing, but it's actually not in our plan because it didn't exist yet. Now we have to go do an update to our plan just because we want to do a project. What's the happy medium there? I don't know.
Great point.
Other than that, it's looking good.
Yeah, we're good. And Emmett and I talked about this, but for anyone else that was wondering, there's all this stuff in the handbook piece that's still in progress, and we were talking about we'll have some time to look at that at our meetings in the fall, particularly while this other piece is out in public comment, because that's kind of a lull for us on the overall plan, and then we can deal with any questions we have on the handbook during that in probably September, October.
Thank you, Tony.
Alright, anything else? Okay, I think we're,
Thank you, that was very
All right.
helpful.
I've got a couple of comments I'd
All
like
right.
to make, if you've heard of the comment section.
yeah, go ahead.
I'm excited to report that Victoria got a $250,000 grant for a 1 mile segment of trail that will ultimately connect some major pieces of trail coming out of Hopkins. The Hopkins Trail goes all the way down along the Minnesota River, down to Chaska, and then Bavaria Trail comes all the way up within 1 mile of Highway 5. The regional trail from Hopkins, Lake Minnetonka Regional Trail, comes all the way out to Victoria and now connects to Highway 5. And we've had this 1 mile segment that's been unpavable for a lot of reasons. But now Victoria has gotten a $250,000 grant, and when the county makes some changes to an adjacent road going by the Arboretum, they will complete the trail all the way along the edge of the Arboretum up to Highway 5. That will connect this linking trail, I used to think it was 57 miles. I don't know if that's still right, but let me tell you, 57 miles of linked trail between Hopkins, Chaska, Victoria, all the cities in between is a big deal. I'm very excited about that, very thankful to the DNR. I've been leading a group, an ad hoc group called the Linking Trail Committee for Eastern Carver County. And we've been meeting since 2014. What's that, 10 years? And just kind of incrementally getting a mile here, a mile there, and now it's gonna get done next year, I hope, a year after that. Very excited.
Cool.
Congratulations.
So I want to share that. The second thing I wanted to talk about is the start time for our meetings. I don't know, the rest of you may have to work every time, so. But when I drive from Chaska and when I go home, I'm right in the middle of rush hour traffic. It's horrible. So selfishly, I would love to see our meeting start at 10 and maybe get done at 12, whatever.
Like 10 p.m.
Huh?
Right.
So
Traffic will be nice then.
anyhow, I'm just inquiring whether or not we have the option or any interest in having a different time than 4 p.m. That's it.
I think we certainly have the option of doing that sort of thing. As a commission, we can set our times. We're limited a little bit on what staff availability might be like for when. But in terms of commissioners, I know that might be a little bit problematic for some of us. I might be able to swing it, but it would be less convenient than the way it is now. So we might have to do some polling of people to see if they're open to anything different. And yeah, like midday especially might be hard. We could potentially go, like an hour earlier or an hour later if that changes one end of your commute, maybe.
Well, we shouldn't change it just for me, but I'm just saying, is there interest among, and I think your idea of polling the troops and seeing what the times are will give you an answer to the question. But anyhow.
Maybe Sandy and I could poll the group. We can come up with something. And like we know that no time is perfect for everyone, so.
The other question would be, does changing the time allow anyone to be a commissioner who isn't currently, and does that change any of our representation? We've talked a little bit before about, no offense, but maybe we don't want everybody that's on the commission to be retirees and having a single kind of point of view. And like,
Bob, we want you.
We have to get that foot into your mouth.
yeah, and we've even talked at one point about whether it would be possible to have youth somehow represented, and that's tricky to figure out with schooling and also just transportation. We haven't pulled that off before because of those. But that's the sort of thing we want to think about, what those impacts are of what future commissioners might be too.
That would be interesting because if it's time, 10 to noon in the morning, the traffic is really considerably less. So it will be, for me, it will be faster to get here and faster to go back. And I'm pretty much sure, you have lunchtime or something. So we could, I don't know, I will be able to pull out that one. So.
So are you saying if we feed you, you will come? Like we could probably do it?
Totally, yes. Yeah.
Now we're getting sometimes.
Yes.
I'm liking this idea.
Okay, you bring food and it doesn't matter the time, I'll be here.
Yeah, I think we should probably set something else to see if we can gather some input. So I need to puzzle on that a little bit too.
I think that may be a challenge for me, because I work in Bloomington on Lindale, and even just getting here is a challenge. At least I only have to take off work for getting here, and then, it's just getting home after that, so. But if we're willing to look at either moving the location to Bloomington or virtual, I might be able to make that work.
Yeah, that's,
We have some weird state
I'm sure we do.
classification as a committee and we can't do virtual meetings.
it
There's
requires a
there's
change
state
to
law.
statute. That
Yeah.
might be something that we can get through at some point, but we have not
It
succeeded
almost
yet.
happened this year. It
Yeah.
was in a bill that just barely didn't make it
The
given
mosquito
the drought.
control district, us and the sports commission, I think, we were lumped in some weird statute, so.
Yeah. Well, it's not even so much that we're lumped in, is that we're not included. There's a statute that says you may do it if you are any of this, which covers everybody but us. It doesn't specifically exclude us, it just, we're not.
If I could add as a recording secretary though, that's done more than just this commission, I do other commissions as well, and you get much better dialogue in person than you do virtually.
Yeah.
So I can see why they have that law. I mean, you really truly do get better dialogue in person. But, if you get better attendance in the winter and in the, that was one thing I really observed was we got way better attendance in inclement weather. With virtual, because there's no excuse, you just plug in and you're there, but definitely better dialogue in person.
We'll pull the commission.
And it might be that it's something that we don't necessarily even do now, but, depending on, who knows what happens next session, there could be other changes that change our answer to it.
True.
We weren't particularly clear transitioning to this was reports. Said comments and it threw me off, but yeah, I don't think I have anything in particular. I know if Cecily were here, she'd mentioned that there continues to be public engagement and planning happening about the Glacial Hills Regional Trail Corridor in northern Washington County. So that's interesting to see move forward. I'm sure I'll be checking that out whenever something happens. But I don't think there's a particular development. Anybody else?
Maybe I'll just quick say, I went to the Party with the Parks with Cecily a few weeks ago and it was really nice event. They had Circus Juventus there, so the kids doing the acrobatics and good food and perfect weather day, so.
That's cool.
If you ever have a chance to do the St. Paul Parks Conservancy events, their staff is really talented and they do a good job.
Good job.
Anyone else?
Do we need to read, talk, or learn, or hear something about the Summit Avenue bike path? The committed courts, all that stuff happening, or we're just done with that?
I
I just asked you because I got the emails from the SOS committee and they say something about the courts lately, so I was not sure what is it.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything coming to us anytime soon.
Okay.
And certainly it can be something that you stay engaged with people in districts about, but I don't think we have any official action pending.
Yeah, the court just ruled that they didn't need to do an environmental assessment because it's not technically a funded project,
It's a
so,
plan.
yeah, so it's not something that we have to deal with at the moment anyway, but I'm sure.
Well, I kind of feel like him, like this is coming again.
That was a hard one.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll hear about it at some point, but it might be a couple years. Okay. Anything from staff?
I'll just say, it's a tough month because we were delayed from the 4th, so thank you for your flexibility. We will be meeting August 1st, so we don't have a lot of time to get ready for our next meeting, but we're working really, really hard on the public comment draft, and we will be back soon with the next draft. Tony, thanks for covering the handbook. That is also moving forward. They're actually moving forward together, but it's really helpful to put that one off a little bit to September or October. So stay tuned, but thanks for your advice today and thank you for your work.
Amen.
All right. Well then, I think with that, we can adjourn and go back down. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone that needs to go to the tunnel, I can take you over in whenever you're ready to go.